Hey everyone, welcome to this interview series. I'm really so excited to have you here. It's called The Value of Purpose, and I've got a special guest, Nick Craig, who's with us today. Nick is the president of the Authentic Leadership Institute. He's a writer for the Harvard Business Review. He's written books, and he's going to talk specifically about discovering and translating purpose and how this is at the cutting edge of what's happening in the world of business. Welcome, Nick. Thanks so much for joining us.
This is sweet. I've spent a very long period of time, last 25 years, working with senior executives on all kinds of different types of journeys of change. And I think where I started to bump into the need for purpose was about 15 years ago, when I realized that I was working with a bunch of very famous professors from Harvard and MIT and Wharton on these large change initiatives. And most of them would fail, which was a shock to me, because I figured if I was working with the best, then it must always work. Well, in truth, it didn't. But sometimes it would work, and then they would write a Harvard Business Review article that made the process that was failing look like this easy process. You just follow these steps, and magical things will happen, right? And I knew the truth, which is 70% of the time they fail, right? So I was sort of like, well, what is it that we're seeing as to why some of the times it works and some of the times it doesn't? And the key thing that I saw was that the people at the top, when they had some real deep wisdom about who they were and where they were going, they would make any process magical, and it turned into a Harvard Business Review article. And when they didn't have those capabilities, no matter how good we were, it would fail. Okay? So that made me go on a journey of saying, well, what is it that these people have that the rest don't have? And what it became clear about is that authenticity and purpose were the two things that were missing, or were present when it worked. And so in some sense, that was sort of the beginning of the journey for me. But you know, if I were to look at why has purpose become so sexy in the last couple of years? I've been doing this work for over 10 years, and at this point, I've worked with over 6,000 executives on purpose, and I've worked with companies from GEs to the Unilevers, to the ING banks, to the Ben & Jerry's, to Devon Oil and Gas, pharmacy. I mean, I've worked across all different industries over the last 10 years, and then what I'm all sort of shocked by is that all of a sudden purpose has become so, there's so much more conversation about it, right? Now, it's not like purpose is new. Okay, so Marcus Aurelius, who 2,000 years ago wrote the Emperor's Handbook, talks about the value of purpose, right? What's happened though is, I think the big change that's happened and why this has become so much more important is that 10 years ago, when I was working with companies, everybody talked about having a good strategy. And they had all kinds of sexy language they used for how they defined what a good strategy was. There was all kinds of different versions of it. But bottom line is there was a belief that, and this is the Michael Porter world, which was that, you know, if you got the strategy right, everything would work. Well, these days, I don't know if anybody's got a strategy that survives the yearly forecast, right? And so the question then becomes is where do you find certainty when everything is uncertain, right? And so I think purpose is probably the only thing that doesn't change. If you get it right, if you as an organization or as an individual really get clarity about your purpose, it turns out that it's the one thing that's always been there. And we all need something to stand on. I think that if we look at some of the examples that are sitting out there of where people have gravitated toward this, that what you start to have is a system, A, you get the business results, right? Okay. B, you create a culture that has a level of energy and dynamic and creativity, and it's also willing to continue changing in real time. But the dilemma we have right now is what everybody is used to is let's go figure this thing out and let's just keep doing it the same way, okay? And then we can go back to sort of things being normal, quote unquote. Normal is an interesting phrase. But my experience is that I don't know of any organization or industry that I'm working with right now where there's any normal left. So where are we going? We're going to a world in which there's enormous unpredictability, uncertainty, and so if you stand in the old model, if you stand in the new model, there's enormous opportunity for mastery, autonomy, and an experience of leading for purpose. And so it's a very, very different way to think about what does it mean to be in business. Yeah. So that's the bigger challenge we have here, is that it's more than just a set of words. It's a complete different orientation to what does it mean to be in business. Well, Nash, the gift and the curse of something when it becomes popular is it becomes a fad. And what happens is then everybody takes their existing material, rebrands it with the new label on top of it. Re-engineering in the 1990s went through this process of going from being something where you really rethought the way you did business to being how you did layoffs, right? And so it got turned into something that was never meant to be. And purpose has the same possibility. And I've seen already an enormous amount of things done with the word purpose associated with it, which from my perspective is really incredibly inauthentic. Right? Yeah. So I think the challenge we have right now is if you look out there, most ad agencies and communications agencies are now doing work on purpose. And for a certain amount of money, you can hire them and they will go in and help you figure out as an organization what's your purpose. And they will come up with a great set of communication vehicles so you can communicate it to both your population of employees as well as your customers. Purpose, unfortunately, if you really get purpose right, it will kick your butt. It will force you to do some very challenging things within your business. It will have you stop products. It will have you stop divisions. It will have you restructure things. It will have you get rid of people that you realize really are not aligned with the purpose and bring in some other people. It will really, really force you to do the hard right versus the easy wrong, which is the phrase I use about where purpose really shows up. One of the gifts I've had of the last 10 years is I've gotten to work with the CEO of Ben & Jerry's, a guy named Jostein Solheim. He's a Norwegian of all things, but there's a company called Unilever, which is a very big consumer goods company that bought Ben & Jerry's about 15 years ago, right? And they proceeded to every couple of years have a new executive come in and try to run it. And for the most part, it wasn't working as much as it wasn't really taking off. And over time, the business started to lose market share. So if you take Ben & Jerry, the two guys that created it, they had a garage that they basically made their ice cream out of and sold it out of in Burlington, Vermont. And their whole ethos was to be the anti-corporate guys doing this crazy, wacky stuff and to basically make fun of the existing corporate concepts, right? Unfortunately, they were terrible businessmen. And at some point, they got themselves in trouble and basically they sold. So Jostein came in and he was supposed to turn this thing around, and he was a good turnaround guy. He'd been in ice cream for 30 years, turned around multiple businesses. And then he comes to the program with me and I help him figure out what his purpose is. And Jostein's purpose is to thrive in ambiguity and chaos for things that really matter. Now, he has to have ambiguity and chaos for him to be happy. Okay, so he's a kind of guy that if things are working, he will break them so that he can have something to fix. But he needs something to fix. Well, he was in the perfect place because he was in a business that the people at Ben & Jerry's decided to act as if Unilever didn't exist. And the people at Unilever acted as if Ben & Jerry's was just one more thing that they could do whatever they want to with it. He stood in between all that crazy stuff. And he was about to get a promotion. He was about to get the huge increase in pay, the stock options, move to London, family would be happy. And he decided, once he got clear on his purpose, that he had to stay at Ben & Jerry's because that would be the place he would best be able to live his purpose. So He's been there, he's still there now. So he's now running it 7 years. And all of the work they did on the GMO work, all the work they did with climate fairness, all the work they did with the Black Lives Matter, all of those things would not have happened if he had left. Okay? Now, the most fun example is, so he decides to announce he's staying. He's been 6 months later, and a bunch of the Ben & Jerry's guys come into his office and they say, so we've got this flavor that we would like to do. And he realizes that it's the test. And so whenever you start leading from purpose, at some point the organization is going to give you a test. And the test is one that is binary, that if you succeed, they will be with you forever. And if you fail, you will never get them back. You never know what the test is going to be, though. Okay? And so they say, we have this flavor. It's based on a Saturday Night Live skit that Alec Baldwin did called Sweaty Balls. Okay? And so he looks at it and says, no, I can't do this. This is way too racy, too crazy. And so then he goes and thinks about it. And he realizes that that's the test. So he says, okay, let's do it. All of Unilever, everybody said, no, you can't do this. They released this product before Christmas. Walmart delists it. Every major retailer delists it and says they won't sell it. It becomes the hottest thing, the most sought after product for that season of Christmas. Every newscaster, every program had to do something with that ice cream. Okay? Right. He got into so much trouble with so many people. But he had the employees really get that he was so 100% committed to what this organization's purpose and ethos was. And Ben & Jerry really got that he is their brother. Okay, so recently, just before the election here in the United States, they ended up releasing a flavor called Black Lives Matter. And they hadn't told Ben about it, so Ben calls up Yostein and said, you outbend me. Okay? Well, that's where, see, this is where purpose really, really, really matters. And you'll notice that as I tell the story, that it's not just all about serious shit. Now, in the meantime, Yostein got the business from 5% decline to 11 to 12% growth over the last 5 years. Okay? Yeah. So you can have all of these things happen. And if you go to the Ben & Jerry's offices, you know, it's sort of like you might as well be 10 years old, and there's a slide in the front area. You know, everybody you can have a dog in the office, and it's just this wonderful culture. My criteria for whether purpose is present or not, if the curious little boy and girl inside of the people is present, then purpose is there. And if not, there's no purpose in the room. We're working with leaders and helping them each discover their individual purpose. And in some ways, the way we look at it is, and what we found is that it's so much more powerful to get individual purpose figured out first before you tackle organizational purpose. And the question then becomes is why? Well, the answer is that, you know, when we work with people and we figure out what the deep purpose that has been leading them their whole life, it is an epiphany moment. It is an experience that there's a before and after. It is visceral. You can feel it. Everybody else feels it. It's like there's no way, you don't need a list of criteria to like know, did I figure out what the purpose is that's been leading me all the life? It's this, oh my God, that's it. And the challenge is once you've had that experience, then you then demand that when you look at the organization's purpose as well. And the challenge we have is most organizational purposes are a nice bling phrase that actually don't represent the deeper purpose that's really meant to be there. So that's the tension. Let's talk about the founder, owner, entrepreneur version here. So when I've worked with individuals who are in that role, the distance between their purpose and the organization's purpose is maybe about 10%. It's extremely close. So if you look at my purpose is to wake you up and have you finally be home. The organization that I run, our purpose is to wake up those who will wake up the many. There's a real alignment between those two purpose statements. I am one of the guys you're talking about, guys or gals you're talking about, who's running a relatively small business. You know, we do about, you know, $5 million a year in work, and you know, I have about 10 people in the office and about 30 people around the world that do work for us. And you know, we have all the challenges of being a small business, right? Which is, you know, there's a lot of things I would love to be able to do that I can't afford. Right? It's like if I really wanted to do it right, it would just cost me a fortune, but so I have to figure out how to get it done anyway. And so we have to live our purpose, right? And we have to make choices about which clients do we work with, and all the things that go, all the hard issues, right? And so, you know, for me personally, the running of the business was never something I actually wanted to do. I just wanted to do the work. But I ended up running a business as well. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who are equally the same. And my purpose always is there to remind me of why am I doing this thing, right? And what is it we're trying to create, and why are we where we're trying to go. So, I mean, I just want to make sure that everybody who's listening to this doesn't see that, you know, yes, I work with some very large companies doing some very intense things. And actually Ben & Jerry's is about 500 million in size, so it's not that big. But I am also one of these individuals that you're talking about, right? Where we are actually a living experiment about how do you lead from purpose. Or why did the organization get created? What is its unique gift that it brings to the world that no one else can bring? What is it that it has, what's the filter of how it sees the world that's different than anyone else sees it? And you know, when I worked with, so I worked with a big bank in Singapore, development bank in Singapore, and these guys were awful at coming up with purpose. I mean, they came up with like, we want to become the gold standard of banking, and I was like, I literally looked at all of them and said, really, that is just useless, right? They were a bunch of senior bankers, and they did not like me saying that, but I was like, no, that is just not going to work. And then one of them started to talk about when they were a kid growing up in Singapore. It was the post office bank that their aunt worked in, and that, you know, every 6 months, the most glorious day of their life was when they took their piggyback bank to the bank, to his aunt, who then told him how much money he'd made, right? And it was like this magical thing that happened. He says, you know, what if we made banking joyful? And the whole room said, no, that is impossible, right? And over about an hour and a half, they all dawned on them that, you know what? If they don't make banking joyful, no one's going to be dealing with them, because nobody actually enjoys banking. What if you made it joyful? And then, but you know, it came out of a conversation of somebody talking about their experience as a kid. So you know, purpose comes from these deep journeys that we've been on, and many times in a smaller business, it's because of some of the original founders and the journey that they were on. And there's some connection and there's some insight as to what is it that you're here to bring to the world that wouldn't be here if you didn't exist. And that in some sense is the ultimate purpose question, right? If your business disappeared tomorrow, and in a year from now, what would people say they most missed that could not be replaced? That's the answer to whether you're leading and your organization from purpose. I mean, I use the Apple example sometimes, and you know, Apple's purpose at one point was to just make computers, right? And in some sense, we saw what happened. Their stock went to nothing. And Steve came back and said, you know, our purpose is to change the world through the technology that we design. And you know, we can see what the result has been. It's been and so if I said to everybody in the room, I'm going to get rid of all your iPhones and all your Apple products, would you miss them? I guess there would be a lot of people moaning significantly about that consequence. So there really is a question about what is the gift that each organization brings, and that's where purpose lies. Look, I've done it both ways. So I've done it where, and I can show you a video that will just make you cry at the end, where I take the top 100 in a business. We have everybody figure out their individual purposes, and then we do the organizational purpose piece. and you get both and, which really gets you this big amplitude of impact, and you get all the connection and all the energy and all the alignment and all the commitment. And at the end of it, it just makes you cry, right? It's just the most amazing, amazing thing. And at the same time, if we look in history, we look at Tim Callagher and we look at Southwest Airlines. And the truth of the matter is he and his COO sitting in a restaurant on the back of a napkin coming up with to create the freedom to fly for everybody as the purpose that they then instantiated into the organization that became Southwest Airlines. Okay? Or if we look at Walmart, or if we look at Apple, or if we look at many, many organizations, the truth is that there was the magic of an individual that was able to seize on something that everybody else immediately saw that they could participate in, that would actually allow them to fulfill their purpose as well. So here's the answer. The answer is I wish it was simpler and linear. And the truth of the matter is the beautiful thing about purpose is it will always be a little messy as to how you find it. And I have gone in with all these different options for what process I'm going to use. And I'll tell you, every time when it finally shows up, I'm like, that's how it showed up? I'm like, shit, okay, that was not on the agenda, but that's so good. And the whole room, you watch the whole room just like get it. And is it because some individual just finally figured it out and said, guys, this is what we've always been, and they all go, oh my God, or is it because everybody came together and it sort of came out of the group? I've had all of those options happen. And so, I wish it was more of a linear process for how you get there. And that's not to say you don't bring a bunch of people together. And at the same time, there's something about when somebody comes up with a beautiful purpose that has a big impact and that people get aligned around it. So I think both are true, right? I do believe that the challenge you have when an individual does it is how do you get everybody else to buy in? That person has to be a beautiful communicator for that to work. I do think that when you get a large group of people together, the challenge you have is that you tend to get everything averaged out, and it's much harder to get the unique, beautiful purpose that's really there to have its day in the way that it should. Now, it can be done, and I've done it a number of times and been really excited about what we pulled off. But when I looked at the DBS case, it was one guy who basically started saying this, and everybody else said, no, that's useless. And then an hour and a half later, they all basically bought it and said, oh my God, this is it. And then it went viral. And then every meeting in the bank within a month, everybody started the meeting with saying, how are we going to make this meeting joyful? And was this meeting joyful? And it was just like, it had been sitting there waiting to be watered. Okay? And okay, it came, one guy drove that thing, and then everybody else bought into it. Was it a group of people sitting there doing it together? Yes. Did they all have to get on the same page? Absolutely. So, Nash, is the great thing about purpose is when it shows up, it's so good, it doesn't care who created it or how it was done. Okay, it's probably one of the litmus tests. Is you don't care about the process. Once you get it, you go, it's so good. Who cares how we got here? We are getting hired by organizations that are either number one or number two within their industry, and they see completely new competitors coming online, and they see massive disruption, and basically there's no way that they can hold on to the existing model that they've been operating from for 10 or 15 years. It's all broken. It's all going away. And they've got one chance to do this right and figure this thing out. So those are the companies that we end up working with. And they're all over the world. And they're from big box retailers to consumer goods companies to banks to whatever the case may be. And what's interesting is that they all know that if they don't go for a purpose and they don't get people 100% engaged at the deep core of who they are, then they're probably not going to make it. There's a level of engagement and commitment, alignment, energy that is required that you can no longer fake. They're all going to go there because they realize the alternative is somebody else is going to get there first. So that's in some sense what's happening, right? Is that it really isn't like, well, should we do it? It's more like if we don't do it, it's all pretty clear we're not going to be able, we will not win, or we will not survive. So there's too much disruption going on for people to be sitting there complacently saying, look, we can still stay with what we've been doing in the past. The level of energy that people are getting when they do this work and when they get clarity of their purpose, and the organization's purpose is also clear, is so tangible and so real that you don't need to wait for the data to show up to know that it has a huge impact. Yes. So if we look at organizational purpose, which is what we're talking about, the fundamental question that you have to ask is if we disappear tomorrow, who would miss us and why? Okay, and that gets to not just the product, but the experience that people have interacting with you. What is the characteristic of why people have conversations with you as an organization? Okay, what is it that is that thing that you bring that they say, well, you know, they may be similar to these guys, but here's the thing that they do that nobody else does. And the same thing for the individual. The gift of the individual is what's the unique gift that you bring to the world is in some sense the way I look at what purpose is. And what is it that when the answer for the individual is if I replaced you with someone equally as good in your role, and I interviewed everyone 3 months later and I said, so what do you most miss about Nash? The answer to that question would probably be your purpose. The purpose is what is it you bring that if you're not there, it's not going to show up independent of your skills or capabilities. That's what purpose is. So I think the beauty of this is that purpose, we each have a unique gift that we're here to bring. The challenge is most of us don't know what it is, right? So in some ways, the quote I like to use is the one that's attributed to Einstein, which is, every one of us is a genius, but most of us have been told that we're a fish that need to climb a tree, and we spend our whole life thinking we're stupid, right? And the challenge is most of us don't know what we are, right? And the value of purpose is you finally know what you are, and then you know what stage you're supposed to be singing your song on. Same thing true for an organization. Once you really know, then you know what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. It makes life so much easier. Your strategy is an expression of your purpose. And the strategy will change based on the current reality, which will be changing all the time, as to what your product mix is, what you do. Are you a service business or are you a product business? You know, all these things can change over time, right? And the most successful companies have never been stuck on the strategy, okay? They've been stuck on the purpose. Look, I think that the challenge for every one of us that runs a business, me included, is that the day-to-day is like taking out the trash a lot. And the question is where's the magic? Because, you know, customers all of a sudden, they're all excited, and then all of a sudden they disappear and things change. And then the ups and downs and all the crazy things that go along with it. I had a friend of mine that sat down with me about a couple of years ago as I was complaining about everything. He said, you know what, my biggest regret is I didn't enjoy the ride, because I was always focusing on the next problem I had to solve. He said, you know, the value of purpose when you own it is you can actually enjoy the ride, right? So that would be my real final offer to everyone, is the value of purpose is that you get to more enjoy the ride as opposed to just dealing with whatever the next thing is that you want to deal with. And those things will always be there, because purpose brings meaning to the meaninglessness of the journey sometimes. And that's the true power of purpose, is it's the meaning-making machine. It has us see the possibility where other things didn't exist.
So thanks everyone. That draws us to the end of our interview series, our interview today with Nick Craig. Thanks so much, Nick, for being with us. I hope you found it really, really interesting and valuable to you. You know, when I think back over the interview, there are 4 things that really stick out in my mind. And here they are. Here are your 4 key takeaways. Number 1 is that absolutely purpose is a key driver of business performance, but it has to come from a real and an authentic place. Number 2 is that discovering your purpose is never a linear or easy process. It's often a messy process, as Nick has explained from his experience. But that's really where the magic lies. So dig deep and go for that process and use some of the questions that he gave us to actually uncover that. Number 3 is that purpose is what compels you to make the tough choices, the choices that are going to enable you to stand out in a busy marketplace. So, having that purpose and then your strategy, which comes from your purpose, is such a key differentiator. And lastly, for a lot of owner-led businesses, a personal purpose, a leadership purpose has to come before the company purpose. So think about what it is that your leadership purpose is about, what it is that you stand for, and then try to align your business purpose with that. So those are my 4 key takeaways. Look forward to the next interview that I'll be conducting soon. Stay tuned for that. If you want to find out more, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can like this video and also go to my website, nashbillimoria.com. or you can check me out on LinkedIn as well. I look forward to adding more value to your lives and businesses, and thanks so much for listening in. Bye for now.